Do you remember the Vietnam Formula One circuit? No? Well, that's probably because we never actually got to see it. It's time for another abandoned circuit. This time, the Hanoi circuit in Vietnam. Last time we covered the Spanish circuit in Valencia, so if you haven't seen that video, I'll leave a link below or just click the card above. But what happened to Vietnam? Well, it was the race that never happened. Vietnam is an interesting case because Formula One didn't leave the race behind. It actually never went there in the first place. We were meant to have the first race in 2020, and the circuit was designed by Formula One itself in association with Herman Tilke's design company. In fact, if you read the Formula One spiel, they promise something quite special. They claim there is a bit of the Nürburgring circuit in turns 1 and 2, Suzuka S's from turns 16 to 19, and they even used Monaco as a reference point. It all sounds great, but if you look at the track map itself, it's pretty wild. The problem is there was never any running of the circuit, so it's hard to have a truly representative view of the track and what could have been. The best we actually have is the F1 game from 2020, which had the circuit in it in anticipation of Formula One going there that year, and they just never took it out. So let's take a look at it. The fairly standard length pit straight by today's standards, with a hard braking zone into turn 1, and a tight left-hander goes instantly into a deceptive right-hander. As soon as you want to get on the throttle, the corner tightens again, but you need to manage the understeer because you need a really good run out of the corner onto the first long straight. I ran a little bit wide here, so we definitely lost some time, but I am by no means good in this game. Then there is a long run down into turn 6, which leads into another quick right and then left-hander. Much like the first few turns, you need to manage the throttle here to get a good exit, because if you lose time on the exit, you will suffer all down the long straight. And it is long, at 1.5 kilometers. Still, not quite as long as Baku. The DRS point is also a fair way down the straight, but still leaves enough time to get an overtake done. And it's a great overtaking opportunity as well, as there is a really hard braking point for the hairpin at turn 11. Then another short straight before turn 12, leading into the twisty section of the track, which is apparently based on the Monaco run from Saint-Devote to Massenet. I find it pretty funny that they're trying to make those comparisons. We then head through the flowing section, which was designed on the S's at Suzuka, and while I can see the influence to some extent, the circuit has no elevation, and so the comparison just falls flat, pardon the pun. Then the final few turns are slower, tricky and tight, before finishing what is a reasonably short lap. But let's rewind a second. How did we end up with a race in Vietnam in the first place? Vietnam is a beautiful country with some of the finest stretches of sand, some of which can be found just hours away from the Hanoi circuit. The iconic Ha Long Bat was a filming location for Tomorrow Never Dies and Kong Skull Island. The original idea for Formula One to go to Vietnam actually came from Bernie Ecclestone, but he did fairly quickly abandon the idea because at the time, Formula One had been to Asia quite a bit. We already had races in Singapore, China, Japan, and Malaysia. Can we bring back Sepang? What a race circuit. I do miss Sepang. But F1 had also tried to race in Korea and India, and neither of those races really went that well, both of them being removed from the calendar. So the Vietnam idea, it was shelved. That was until Liberty Media purchased the F1 rights in 2017 with their large bags of money. The Vietnam Grand Prix was then announced in November 2018. Construction on the circuit began in earnest, with the pit building, grandstands, and parts of the track taking shape. The project attracted significant attention, with fans and pundits eagerly anticipating its completion. A new circuit does generate a fair bit of buzz. But as with many ambitious projects, things didn't go as planned. The track was a 5.6 kilometer circuit, featuring a hybrid of public roads and purpose-built sections, which were planned to be open to the public in the future. The race would have been 55 laps in total had it have taken place. The initial race was scheduled for the 5th of April 2020, the first of a multi-year contract, but just months before the inaugural race, the pandemic threw a wrench into the works. The race was then omitted from the calendar for the following year as well, for an entirely different reason: corruption. The race was officially cancelled. Following the arrest of Hanoi People's Committee Chairman Nguyen Duc Chung on corruption charges, who just happened to be one of the main stakeholders involved in the Formula One event, Formula One terminated the contract with the circuit. On the 25th of September 2020, he was officially dismissed from all positions, and then on the 22nd of November 2020, the investigation agency of the Ministry of Public Security, that's a bit of a mouthful, announced that Duc Chung played a master role in the theft of many secret documents. Ultimately, because of numerous different charges, including abusing positions and powers while on official duty, he was sentenced to a minimum of 10 years in prison. He's actually been further sentenced for more crimes as recently as last year. And while at the time the charges against him weren't directly related to the Formula One deal itself, he was so involved in bringing Formula One to the country that F1 decided to distance itself from him, and I think Vietnam was very happy for that to be the case. What's interesting to me is what would have happened if there was no pandemic. Formula One would have gone to Vietnam early in the year because that's when it was scheduled. Then the pandemic would have happened, but Duc Chung was charged with corruption later in the year. Would Formula One have then not gone back to the circuit the following year because of the charges? Or because the first race had already taken place, would they have stayed there and we would have actually had Vietnam on the calendar? All ifs, buts and maybes. I guess we'll never know. The closest the circuit has seen to any action was a promotional event held there by Honda in late 2022, early 2023. And then in April 2024, the main straight was used as the venue for the 50th anniversary of the Mobile Police Command's Traditional Day Parade. Not exactly what they had in mind, I don't think. So what's happened to the circuit now? Well, the Vietnamese government essentially shut down the whole project not long after the corruption charges. And in fact, they instructed all media to remove any mention of Formula One. The temporary grandstands, hospitality suites, tech pro barriers and all other infrastructure that had been erected for the race in 2020 had long since been dismantled and sold off. The track itself and main buildings are still present though, but they're abandoned and not being used or looked after. The area around the circuit has been left to the elements, and while there are restrictions on getting close to the pit buildings, there's meant to be security. It seems that security isn't exactly taking their job super serious. Even if there was a chance of Formula One returning to Vietnam, which there isn't, the circuit would not be up to scratch. Not anymore, it's been left to ruin. But it's not just about Formula One and the Formula One racing community. The cancellation had ripple effects beyond just the racing community and affected locals as well. Locals who were excited about the economic boost and international exposure were left disappointed, and money had already been laid out to get the circuit ready for the race, only for it to be left abandoned and left to ruin. That is local money that could have gone into other areas. Maybe there is something that can be done in the future. I hope so.